Hello everyone. Sorry about that. Well, a bit of a hoo-ha. I didn't have any internet, and then I don't know. I hope it's working, but who knows? I guess I'll find out soon enough. Welcome everyone to the Friday Night Live. I've got reams of having had last week. I had about 3 questions and an early finish. I've got like about 5 pages of questions this week. So it's a good job I started early because I think I'm still going to be sat here at midnight, wittering on. So it seems to be working, I think. Who knows? Anyway, it's a bit like that time where I talked to myself for however long it was, 40 minutes, because I didn't have my microphone turned on. Might do another one of those. Okay, so I'll crack straight on here. Day 23, and I have had a few days of feeling great, then a couple of feeling really tired and just want to sleep. I was a daily drinker, about 35 units a week. Is my body and brain still adjusting to changed chemical levels? Is this normal? I even did a COVID test last time in case I was ill. So yes, it is normal. What happens is to go through the physiology again, alcohol is a sedative and your brain reacts to that by becoming hypersensitive so that it can still operate under the sedating effects of the alcohol. That is a perfectly normal and healthy reaction. It's your brain adjusting to the poisonous sedating effects of the alcohol. Problem is when the alcohol wears off, you're left overly stimulated. It's like drinking too much coffee. You feel very anxious, a bit tense, a bit out of sorts. And of course, the more you drink, the worse it gets, because the more you drink, the more your brain has to recalibrate and the worse you feel when it wears off. This has huge impacts on all different areas of our lives, anxiety levels, energy levels, all sorts. One of the big things it does is it impacts our sleep. Sleep is not just about lying down for 8 hours and falling unconscious. To wake up feeling refreshed, you need to go through certain sleep cycles. There's a lot humans don't understand about all these sleep cycles, but one of the main differentiating factors between them is how deeply unconscious you are. So there's something called deep sleep, where, as you would expect, you're very deeply unconscious. But then there's something called REM sleep, where your brain lights up almost as if you're fully conscious. It's a very strange thing. We don't really understand much about it, but it's where you dream. So the main point here is that you go through these different sleep cycles, and a main differentiating factor, as I say, is how deeply conscious or unconscious you are, or how nearly awake you are. Now, when you drink alcohol, for the first part of the night, you're too heavily sedated to get you into for your brain to get you into REM sleep. So, on average, normal, healthy people have 6 or 7 rounds of REM sleep. When you drink, you have only 2 on average. And as I say, that's due to the sedating effects of the alcohol, preventing your brain to get up to that higher level of sleep consciousness where you can dream and go into REM sleep. So that's why, of course, after about 5 hours or so, the alcohol wears off and you're left in that overstimulation phase, which is why drinkers quite often wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, worried, anxious, and completely unable to sleep, even though they may be absolutely exhausted. It's the equivalent of waking up at 4 a.m. drinking like 3 jugs of strong black coffee. So that's how it affects sleep. Now, it's interesting because you say that you're a daily drinker. This is often what we see with daily drinkers when they quit. They go through a few days anxiety and then difficulty sleeping, and then it goes the other way. They almost can't sleep enough. And the reason for that, when you start to understand it, is fairly straightforward when you get that basic principle in place. When you're a daily drinker, it can take anything up to 36 hours and even longer for the overstimulation to end. So when you're a daily drinker, all your brain is almost constantly in that overstimulation phase. It's always adjusted to work under the sedating effects of alcohol. And if you've drunk for years and years, it's always been geared up at that level. So when you quit for the first time in however many years it's been since you've been a daily drinker, it can go back to normal. But that's taking it from like quite a high stimulated level down to a much lower level. And it's similar to if you're drinking like loads and loads of coffee every day and you suddenly cut it out, you just feel really, really exhausted. Of course, there is a knock-on effect here as well, because while you're drinking, you can't go through the proper sleep cycles. And this is a simple physiological fact. When people say, oh, it doesn't affect me, wrong, it does affect you. And I only have one or two, it doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. Even one or two interrupts your sleep cycle. So for however many years you've been drinking daily for, you have never got a good night's sleep, a proper natural quality night's sleep, going through those sleep cycles you need to go through. So it takes a long time to catch up. It's your body finally being able to sleep, and it's going to make the most of it. With it, it doesn't last forever, is what I would say. Completely normal. You will feel drained. 23 days, you'd be, I would guess, over halfway. The longest I've known anyone go through this is just over a month. So hopefully you'll be coming out the other side of it in like another week or so. So stick with it. Next question, why do we become very focused on sugar when we stop drinking? Is it a physical or mental need? And then there was a bit of discussion around this in the post, and someone else said, yeah, good question. Also, why do some people think it's because our bodies are replacing the sugar from alcoholic drinks, but beer and hard liquor have 0 grams of sugar and wine only has 1.2, and none of them have any carbs? I get it that some people add sweet soda to their drinks, but what about the beer and wine? I'm confused. I thought, to be honest, it was beer and wine, but be that as it may, there may be an element of there's lots of sugar in alcoholic drinks, and when you cut it out, you desire it from other places. I see things slightly differently, as I usually do. For me, it's all to do with like coping mechanisms. So, you know, when you drink, you become very conditioned to consuming something to change how you feel. And it's very easy to cut out the alcohol and just reach for the next thing. So for some people, if they smoke, they find they smoke more, or they drink loads of caffeine, or they start stuffing loads of refined sugar down their neck. It's almost like that, oh, I deserve a treat. You become used to, you know, peppering your day with these little treats, consumable treats that make you feel differently. And it's kind of similar to that. And don't forget as well, what I've just talked about, how when you drink regularly, you are constantly tired because you never get a good night's sleep. And when you are tired, you feel drained. And when you are drained, you want to keep reaching for sugar because sugar does give you a burst of energy. So I think there's an element of that in it as well. He doesn't say how long you've stopped for there. But if you're in the first month or so and you're still going through that tired period, I think that's almost like an innate reaction for people. Feel tired, feel drained, and then you want to eat something sweet to kind of pick you up a bit. So that's how I see it. There may be an element of, you know, the sugar and alcohol and you're kind of looking for a replacement of that, but I sort of see it less that way. I've got some incredibly vague questions as well this week. So sounds good, be interested. I knowing about brain fog and the anxiety. That's the question. So the anxiety I've dealt with, alcohol is a sedative, so it creates a feeling of relaxation, but your brain counters it. So when the alcohol wears off, you get a corresponding feeling of anxiety. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that's what happens. That's how the anxiety kicks in. And of course, as the brain becomes more proficient at countering the alcohol, so you need more and more to get the same effect. And as you drink more and more, your brain has to become more and more hypersensitive to counter the sedating effects of the increasing amount of alcohol. So you feel worse and worse when it wears off. That feeling of anxiety you get when the alcohol wears off is alcohol withdrawal. A lot of people struggle with that concept and they think, well, no, only like chronic alcohol dependent people get alcohol withdrawal. That's not the case at all. Everybody who's ever consumed an alcoholic drink has had alcohol withdrawal. The definition of my definition of withdrawal is an unpleasant feeling that is caused by a chemical imbalance that is itself caused by the previous dose of the drug. So anyone who's ever had any alcoholic drink, it's had a sedating effect on them, and their brain has tried to counter it. And in the early stages, when we first start drinking, your brain's never encountered alcohol before, so it really doesn't know what to do with it. What it can do is really very limited, which is why people, when they first start drinking, can get drunk very easily and they've got no tolerance. It takes time to build that tolerance up. And as the tolerance builds up, so there's a withdrawal. So that's that. The brain fog, of course, alcohol is a sedative, so the more you drink, the more stupid you become. It really is that simple. And of course, you're adding on to that the fact that you're not sleeping properly. And that is as true for chronically alcohol dependent people as so-called normal drinkers. It's a sedative that stops you drinking. So however quick or slow mentally you might consider yourself to be, you're going to be more so if you're drinking alcohol. Alcohol makes people stupid. It stops their brain working, and it stops them sleeping. Any tips on understanding the science and learning, but not being falling when things get really tough? Does it take time for the brain to rewire? What scientifically happens in an epic moment? So there's a difference, I think, between learning something academically and applying it to your own personal experience. And that is, I think, key for many people. They can read the book and kind of understand the mechanics behind it, but applying it to your own drinking takes a bit more time and effort. With these moments where we just hit that button and just go for it, I can talk about my experience of it. It was a fairly simple thing. I'd be obsessing more and more about alcohol, and I wouldn't be concentrating on anything because all I was thinking about was having a drink. And then come the next argument or something upsetting would happen, I just think I've had enough. And I had had enough. I'd had enough of the constant thinking about whether to drink or not. And the easiest way to, to silence that particular part of your brain is to have a drink, because if you're already drinking, you haven't got that toing and froing. So I would have a drink, but if I stopped for any length of time, it didn't actually make me feel any better. In fact, often it made me feel a lot worse, because you sit there with the drink. When you're in that situation, what you're thinking is, I've had enough. I've really just had it, and I want to get rid of this misery. So I'm going to have a drink. And then you have a drink, and then what you suddenly realize is it hasn't got rid of the misery at all. You don't feel any better. It's done nothing. So quite often there's a tendency to think, oh, I'll have another one, another one, another one. But what we forget is alcohol, the reason it's not doing what it ought to do is because we haven't had a drink for a few days. The main benefit of alcohol, that time where you drink it and really feel good and happy and relaxed, is when you've been drinking previously. And you've got that withdrawal, that interruption to your brain chemistry. Because if you think about it, alcohol is a sedative, so your brain becomes hypersensitive to counteract it. Okay, so when the alcohol wears off, you've got a feeling of anxiety, you feel a bit out of sorts, you don't feel very good. The quickest way to get rid of that is to have another drink, because you're correcting that chemical imbalance. Your brain's geared up to work under the sedating effects of the alcohol, but there's no alcohol present. That's where the problem comes in. If you then take a drink, you're correcting that chemical imbalance, and you feel so much better. And that's the great pleasure of drinking. So when you hit one of these moments where you haven't drunk for a while and you just think, oh my God, I just want it to end, what you think about is that great pleasure you get when you have a drink, and it makes you feel really relaxed and good. But it only does that by relieving the withdrawal. And if you haven't got a withdrawal, it just makes you feel slightly dulled and a bit sluggish. It doesn't make you feel good at all. So as I say, the tendency then is to think, that didn't do it, I need another one. I'm used to drinking and feeling really good. I've had this drink and I don't feel good at all. Maybe it wasn't strong enough. Maybe I haven't had enough. Maybe I have another one. So you have another and another and another. And before you know it, you're starting to get drunk, and you just carry on at that point, don't you? Because apart from anything else, you're feeling pretty miserable and depressed. You've added on to whatever it was that upset you in the first place, the misery and depression, because you started drinking again. And really all you can go at that point is to completely obliterate your thoughts by just drinking and drinking and drinking. So I think that's the, I don't know necessarily that it's a scientific explanation, but certainly it's a psychological one. It's that kind of, it's not done what it ought to do. Love the lives, and I'm on day 137. Well done. I've been having trouble with itchy skin and my sleep pattern is not very good. So day 137, what's that? That's 4 months, is it? 4 or 5 months nearly. So at that point, it's probably not the alcohol. Your brain chemistry should have got back to normal, and you should be sleeping a lot better. So I don't think it's an alcohol issue. So most people will stop drinking and will feel an awful lot better. They will sleep a lot better. They'll have a lot more energy, and life just gets incredibly better for them. Sometimes people stop and they uncover other issues, like you may have, I don't know, like a mental health issue or sleep disorder or something. and alcohol's kind of been masking it. You say your sleep pattern is not very, so it might not be a diagnosable sleeping disorder, but there's lots of things that can interrupt sleep and spoil your sleeping pattern. So stimulants like caffeine and nicotine too late in the day will ruin your sleep. Funny enough, a mistake some people do is they spend too long in bed, because if you need 7 hours sleep but you're in bed for 9 hours, you're going to be awake for 2 of those hours, however you slice and dice it. And don't forget, when you stop drinking, because you're going through quality sleep, you need less of it. What most people find is when they're drinking, they quite happily lie around all day sort of snoozing, but when you stop after a bit, when you get back into that good sleep cycle and start catching up on lost sleep, the missed sleep, you just need a bit less sleep. So maybe 5, 6, 7 hours is enough for you. If you're in bed for any length of time longer than that, you'll be awake for chunks of it. One way to counter that is just get up at the same time, like 6 or 7 in the morning, whatever suits you, but just go to bed incrementally later, and you should end up finding that you sleep through the night. Tips on sleep as well. Exercise helps. So exercising, but exercise earlier in the day. When you exercise, your brain releases adrenaline. It sort of makes you feel awake, makes you feel quite good. It releases endorphins. All these things make you feel really good, but it also can tend to keep you awake. So exercising later in the day is less of a good idea. I mean, if it's still bad, maybe speak to a doctor. But there are a few things you can look at. Itchy skin, I haven't got a clue at all, I'm afraid. So maybe someone else in the group, but if not, again, maybe speak to a doctor. I'm not sure. That could be many things. I'm going out to a pub on Saturday night with work colleagues. This will be my first social function since becoming alcohol-free. I feel confident that I'm safe from the lure of alcohol. It no longer has any lure for me. I wonder if you have some insight into what I should look out for and be mindful of in order to further solidify my new alcohol. That's great news to get to that point. That's absolutely fantastic. So well done. I think someone mentioned this in the comments, but I will say it again anyway. Do a bit of people watching. Treat it like you are a scientist studying a newly discovered life form. Go and watch, because you can learn so much about drinking by dispassionately observing other people drinking. Because what you will find is people will turn up a bit nervous because it's a social thing, particularly a work thing. I emphasize these are work colleagues and not friends, so it's going to be slightly awkward. And the alcohol is a sedative, so of course they will drink some and they will feel better, and they'll go through that initial buzz. But watch, it's fascinating. Watch as the evening draws on what happens to that initial buzz, and how the mood starts to change and how people start to become irritating. And of course, always watch out for the person, if they're there, who manages to get absolutely hammered because it's a work function and the drinks are free, and just thank God it's not you anymore. Helpful hints about avoiding dealing with fading. It's all about reality. It's about seeing it for what it is. Alcohol is just a sedative. It just makes you feel slightly dulled, and that is it. It's extraordinary, all the hype and the glasses and the different types of drinks we have and different drinking occasions and how it ties into celebrations and wakes and so much. And it's just a drug. It's just a sedative. And it's all about just keeping that in mind. It's difficult because society is constantly bombarding us with the, like the romantic fun side of alcohol, which just isn't the reality. So it's all about really just keeping your mind focused on that reality. Hi, William. As you know, I finally managed to stop drinking once I read your book over a year ago now. Thank you. Well done. I know who this is, obviously. I wonder if it would be helpful to share some awareness of the journey into solidifying sobriety once we have learned the science and practice changing our responses and navigating life without using alcohol. There are lots of smaller groups to support more support. There are lots of smaller groups to support more support and closeness. These groups enable us to make friendships with others who are alcohol-free, so this helps it become our new normal. This journey makes us reevaluate our lives and how we want to live with integrity. It's really helpful to meet others in Zoom meetings, etc., to help us on this journey. Hope this makes sense. Thanks for all you do. Absolutely. So obviously the Alcohol Explained group is quite huge now, but there are a lot of smaller groups that are worth looking into. And Dawn's Sober Fish is a particularly good one. I am a member of it, and that's why I recommend it, purely because I see what goes on in there, and it's excellent. So there are lots and lots of smaller ones that are more bespoke. Obviously, if you put some money into it, the admin can put more time and provide more services. So that's absolutely the case. I was going to say something else on there. Yeah, I think so. This is the thing with the Zoom meeting. So there were Zoom meetings in Alcohol Explained, and a lot of people keep asking about them. I'm kind of inclined to just suggest to people, if you want to do a Zoom meeting, pick a time that suits you, put it in the events thing in the group, and see who comes along with it. Obviously, if you can make contact with a couple of people beforehand and make sure they're coming, you don't waste your time. But all you do is schedule the meeting on Zoom and put it in events. It's entirely up to you then how you run it. But usually what you do, if you're hosting it, you kind of like welcome everyone, and then just talk a bit about your week, your day, whatever your thoughts are, and then pass on to everyone else. What I generally suggest is, if people have their cameras and microphones on, it means they're happy to speak. If people have got their cameras turned off, it means they're there just to listen. So if you're hosting it and there's someone with a camera off, maybe don't ask them, because people can feel quite intimidated. And just do it that way, rather than to try and have this massive formal thing around the meetings, which can be quite difficult to get people to do. So I'm completely confused about where I'm going with this now. I've got so many sheets of paper. Oh, here we go. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Watching your lives on YouTube really helps me to solidify my sobriety. Excellent. I'm coming up to 3 months. Well done, and feeling much better in every way. However, I still have to remind myself regularly of the reality of drinking rather than the fantasy that is projected by society, media, etc. How long will I have to keep doing this before it becomes automatic? It's kind of like having a piece of string, to be honest. The more you do it, the easier it gets. But I think, to be honest, for most of us, it never ends as such, because we are constantly bombarded with this image. But the thing is, as I say, it does get easier, and hopefully at some point it'll become automatic. I'm trying to think, see, my own journey was slightly different because a lot of it fell into place much further down the line for me. I'm 8 years sober next month, in about 3 weeks. So it's been a long time, but it's hard to put my finger on when exactly it happened. So I don't know, but I don't underestimate the power of this positive image around alcohol that is being projected all the time. So it does, yeah, unfortunately, it does take a bit of work. It does get easier, and whether that's, it takes you 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it is, just know that it's incrementally getting better. And I think it's different for everyone, to be honest. I've been drinking since I was 17. I'm now 73. Gave up drinking 4 months and find the feelings I get quite scary. So I can see why it's hard for people not to start again. I only drank 2 glasses of wine per night for the last 15 years, and I almost feel as if the physical stuff I'm experiencing isn't worth going through for the amount I drank. So many people feel like this and don't understand why. Can you give me some ideas how long this might go on for, please? So at this point, the chemical anxiety will have disappeared. So what you're experiencing is other underlying anxiety. So this is difficult for me to comment on. It might be that you need to speak to someone. It might be to go to a bit of counselling, or something. Speak to someone and see if you can get to the bottom of it. There's lots of reasons why that might be there. But what I would say is, where you say the physical stuff I'm experiencing isn't worth the amount you drank. 2 glasses of wine is not an insignificant amount. Every night for 15 years, it's a fairly big chunk of alcohol, to be honest, particularly if it's, like a full large glass of wine. That's 2/3 of a bottle of wine. So it's quite a chunk. So as I say, yeah, so this, don't underestimate that element of it. But what I would say is, alcohol isn't going to make anything better, because don't forget what I was talking about previously. For every reaction, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Whatever comforting effect you get from the alcohol, you then get a corresponding feeling of anxiety when it wears off. So if you're only drinking evening time, say you're drinking for 4 or 5 hours, out of 24 hours, you're drinking for 4 or 5 of them, and the rest of the time you're sitting there suffering the withdrawal. So if you can deal with this anxiety you've got now, that would have been exaggerated for 19 hours of your day by the withdrawal, you can certainly cope with it sober. But you might need to speak to someone and get some other coping mechanisms in place, as I say. So that is almost like beyond my remit. As I say, if you've got an underlying anxiety issue or something, it's worth speaking to someone about it. It might be worth starting with your GP, your doctor, and seeing what they suggest in the first instance. Hi, William. I'm only on day 4 this time. I gave up a few months last year, which was great, and went back to it. I've read your books and I'm determined to stick to it. I have an important interview on Saturday morning. Have you any tips for my anxiety for it? I'm afraid I'll have a panic attack in the interview, as I've been prone to panic attacks created from alcohol. And after about 3 weeks sober, they go away completely. But I'll only have 1 week sober by Saturday. And I don't want to miss out on this chance. It would be a great job for me to get. Thanks so much. I think you're fantastic. Love the books and the lives. Thank you. So this is part of the thing, is sometimes you have to suffer things. That's probably not a very good answer. I specifically did a module on this in the online course, actually. But so if you've got something coming up that you are nervous about, you've got a choice of 2 things. You either drink to allay the nerves, or you don't drink and you just suffer the nerves. So let's say you've got, and the reason I had this is because I had exactly the same thing. I had this work, I had to travel out to Switzerland to see this big client, and I was really nervous about it for like a week before I got there. But the fact of the matter is, because I was nervous, I was constantly thinking about it, and I was constantly fretting around it. So I was constantly checking. I had all my travel documents, because it was all, all the additional stuff on top of the normal travel documents with all COVID. So I was constantly checking I had all that. I was constantly going over my notes for the meeting. I was, because I was nervous, I was constantly doing this, with the result that I was very, very well prepared. Okay. Had I chosen a different route, let's say I'd just chosen to have a few drinks, take the edge off it. Okay, so I'd have had a couple of drinks, I would have felt better because it would have anaesthetised the nerves. But then I wouldn't have slept well. I would have woken up tired, and I would have woken up with additional anxiety as the alcohol had worn off. So I would then have to have another drink the next day, or suffer double anxiety the next day. So kind of what would be the point? But assuming that I'd taken the decision that I didn't want to suffer the anxiety, so I'd have a drink to make it go away, I'd then have a drink the next night and the next and the next. So by the time I actually got to the meeting, I'd have had a week of bad sleep. I'd have all the alcohol-induced anxiety, and I wouldn't have done all the preparation I did otherwise. I would say what you need to bear in mind is you should be okay, because a week sober is still time enough for pretty much for your brain chemistry to get back to normal. And I can't speak for you, but for me, the beforehand is always the worst of these things. When you get in there, or when I get into these things, it's almost like you just have to get on with it. And it's always a lot better when you get in there. And the other thing to do is concentrate on it when it's over, because time is inexorable. It just keeps marching forward. And just as the event's getting closer, so is the end of the event. So just keep focusing on the fact that, how many hours is it now? If it's tomorrow, you'll be walking out of there soon, and it will be over one way or another. Another thing, and this doesn't go down for everyone, because this day and age we're really kind of drummed in to be positive about everything. But I kind of like to prepare for the worst, because like a job interview, and it might be a really good option, but then think to yourself, well, what's the worst that can happen? You go in there, you don't get the job. Is there going to be another chance? Will there be other jobs coming up? Probably. Will they be a good opportunity? You'd hope. Do you know what I mean? So try and accept that the worst that can happen isn't actually unmanageable anyway, and that can take a huge amount of the nerves away as well. We have a second home in a beach community. It is nicknamed Alcoholic Island for good reason. Total vacation town, and the locals are highly functional, regular partiers. It's difficult to be there without urge, but we pay a mortgage and don't want to avoid our beautiful beach pad. How to handle the whole situation? Sell it, rent it. You can sell it or rent it, or you can go there and not drink. I mean, it might be irritating if you're surrounded by drunken idiots. In which case, yeah, maybe you do want to rent it or sell it. But presumably, I don't know, it's hard to say. I mean, if it is genuinely just thousands of drunken people around there, then it sounds absolutely disgusting. And yeah, sell it or rent it, I guess. But if it's not quite that bad, if there is, you know, get up at 6 in the morning, the beach is nice and empty, and you can find quiet places in the evening, then just go there and don't drink, I guess. I have a question. I started this journey, hate that word, a little over 2 years ago. I'm 61 and have had success, but I managed to go 2 to 3 months dry at a time. But I have so many triggers. I've used alcohol as the solution for absolutely everything all my life. My latest problem was when I got COVID a couple of weeks ago. I wanted relief from the body aches and just said, F it. I'm trying to stop again, and it just gets harder and harder to stop when I start. Is there hope for me, or have I ruined my brain from all the decades of drinking? No, you haven't ruined your brain, but it's been drummed into you for years and years and years that you need alcohol to enjoy yourself and to cope with life. And that's the problem. I mean, if you've got COVID, I can't imagine having a drink made you feel any better. And it's fine to say, yeah, it's a sedative, so it might take the edge off things, but presumably a paracetamol would have done much the same. And also, I think there's kind of this very much, it's something I think we're all guilty of to a degree, but I think more so in the West than anywhere else. And that's, I have a right to be happy and feeling good all the time. You had COVID, of course you're going to be feeling ill. And sometimes you just have to feel rotten for a few days until your body gets on top of things. I can't imagine how awful you felt a few hours after you drunk with COVID and then a hangover. You must have been absolutely even worse. And then presumably took you even longer to get over COVID. So you need to start working on your mindset. I mean, you need to start seeing alcohol for what it is. It doesn't give anything unless you're already really hungover from it and feeling rotten from the previous dose. But it is mindset. It's very hard for me to drill down and to talk about. I mean, you probably need to do some work yourself there and think about. A good thing to do is when you do have that thing and you think I'm going to drink, stop for a minute and just think, what am I hoping this will do for me? Presumably make you feel a lot better. Well, then have the drink and see if you do feel better, because most of the time we don't at all. Because as I say, it is just a sedative. It just makes you feel slightly dull. It doesn't make you feel great. It doesn't make your problems go away. It doesn't make your COVID go away. So start maybe working on that side of things and seeing what you're hoping to get from alcohol, and really drilling down and seeing if it's giving you what you expect. Because if it isn't, then there's no point having it. Yes, I would like to know, has anyone tried hypnotherapy as a means of blocking out the cravings, or any other type of applicable therapy? I guess the answer to that is yes. I think people must have. I assume the question's supposed to be, does it work? I've never tried hypnotherapy. What little I know of it is not like the stuff you see in Hollywood films where you fall into a trance and you can be made to walk around like a chicken or something. It's all about relaxing and being able to communicate ideas when you're very relaxed, so you're more receptive to them. And doing that requires, as I understand it, quite a close relationship between the patient and the, what would you call them, hypnotizer? I don't know. So it takes time and effort. There's no point just going to someone and they sit you down for 20 minutes. It just doesn't work that way. That's my understanding of it anyway. So you need to go to someone reputable, and you can expect to go to many sessions in order to develop that, that very close thing. And also you need to be careful what they're telling you. And this is, I suppose, where I struggle with it sometimes, because I think some people are more receptive to some ideas than others. So yeah, as I say, the hypnotherapist would need to know you fairly well in order to make sure they were hitting the mark, I suppose. Thoughts on dry January and its impact on our habits as a society? Stopping even for a short period is obviously a good thing, but any views about the longer term implications and patterns as a whole? Dry January, yes, it is good, but let's face it, what it is for most people is it's like, I've drunk too much over Christmas, so I'll have a month off. And that's pretty much it. So to a degree, it gives them license to drink more over Christmas because they're going to stop for January. And they have no intention of going long term. And because of that, there's very much, I think, among the people I've spoken to, which admittedly is not the whole population at all, but there's a tendency then to approach it that I'm only going to have the month off. There's someone at work and he's just like, yeah, I'm not going out tonight, I'm doing dry January. So I'm just going to not do anything. And in that case, what you're actually doing is reinforcing the fact that life without alcohol isn't really much fun. Because of course, if you're sitting in waiting for the 1st of February to tick around, just watching your watch, you're not going to have a particularly happy time anyway. So if you approach it that way, it's probably doing, I won't say more harm than good, because you're, well, maybe it is, you know, if it encourages you to drink more over Christmas and then reinforcing the fact you need alcohol to enjoy yourself, it might well be doing more harm than good. I think there is, though, there is a bit of a movement now for people to use it to taste sobriety and see how much better they feel. And I think if you go about it the right way, that can be hugely beneficial. And of course, we know people who have done dry January and just kept it going. So that's been the stepping stone for them having a sober life. But I do believe you need to do it with the right mindset. As I say, sitting at home for a month feeling miserable because you can't drink, treating it like a diet because you drank too much over Christmas, is probably not really going to do it. I think the fact it's catching on more and more is very indicative of the changing view society generally has about alcohol. People more and more are starting to see it as a carcinogenic drug, which it is. It's bizarre we think of it in any other way, really. I've been, because I started at a weird time, I've got no idea how long I've been talking for. Just keep going, I guess, about halfway. I've been mostly sober for 3 years now. I have drunk on occasions such as vacations and celebrations. It's rare, maybe a few times a year. When I do drink, the goal is always to have a couple, but that never happens. I have no tolerance now, and I think I can drink like I used to when I was drinking 2 bottles of wine a day. So now the hangovers are miserable and last a week. Any advice to help stop the cravings on special occasions? My mum's birthday is this weekend at a Mexican restaurant, and I want to avoid the margarita hangover. Let's get what cravings are. They're a conscious thought process whereby you start obsessing about how great it will be to have an alcoholic drink and how miserable you are you can't have one. And of course, while 90% of your attention is taken up with that unpleasant mental tantrum, you're not enjoying what's going on. So if you turn up to your mum's birthday at the Mexican restaurant and sit there drooling over everyone's alcoholic drinks because you can't have one, you will be very miserable. And then if you finally give in, which you probably will do, and have a drink, yes, you'll feel much better because of no reason other than it's a placebo, because the alcohol will have removed that distressing mental conundrum. Like I mentioned previously, the best way to get rid of an argument about should I, shouldn't I, is just have a drink, because then it's done. Okay, well, no, it's not the best way to do it, but it's the most obvious way to most people, is when you're in that mental tug of war, should I, shouldn't I, if you have a drink, you end it immediately. But you need to bear in mind there's other ways of doing it which don't require you to spend 50 quid, tip a carcinogenic poison down your neck, and then be ill for a week. Just focus on it for what it is. You're going to a Mexican restaurant with your family, who I presume you don't hate. What's not to like about it? Just go and enjoy it. The only reason you won't enjoy it is if you're obsessing, as I say, this mental tantrum, this toing and froing, in which case you won't be, focusing on the nice food or whatever it is, the company. You won't be enjoying it at all. And the trouble is, this kind of thing, it's self-fulfilling, because if you go out and obsess about alcohol and don't enjoy yourself and then give in and have a drink, because you're no longer obsessing about the alcohol, because you've taken that placebo and removed the craving, you can then relax and enjoy yourself. So then you walk away thinking, I was really miserable when I wasn't drinking, and then I had a drink and I really enjoyed myself. And the next time you go and try and not drink, it's even worse, because you're sat there thinking, I remember last time I had a horrible time, and then I had a drink and had a fantastic time. I really want a drink. And it just gets worse and worse. And so you have to free yourself from that. You have to recognise the thought process for what it is, and just focus on what's going to be. There will be nice food there. There should be some nice alcohol-free drinks, and you're going to be with friends and family. What's not to like? Look forward to the actual genuine pleasure in the situation. If the only pleasure there was the alcohol, don't go. Just sit at home on the sofa with a 4-pack of Special Brew and have all that fun. There's no pleasure in the alcohol. The pleasure is in the event. The alcohol, by getting you into a certain mindset can stop you enjoying the event until you have some of it. I've just reached my 2 months of sobriety, and I'm finding that night after night I'm having dreams of drinking and being drunk. It puts me in such an emotional and foul mood for most of the following day. Why is this happening, and is it possible to stop them from happening? So you're asking me now to explain dreams and to stop you dreaming, neither of which I can do. Nobody understands dreams. Okay, we just don't know anything about them. People pretend that they can interpret them and give meaning to things. Be that as it may. I dream that I'm drinking, and I think it would be a miracle if I didn't, because because of this that I do, apart from work and sleep, 90% of my life is taken up thinking or talking about alcohol. It would be extraordinary if I never dreamt about drinking. I regularly dream about drinking to such an extent. There's this weird local pub that has never existed, nothing even like it, but I find myself going there regularly in my dreams for some reason. What I don't think dreaming about drinking is surprising. What I find surprising is you say it puts me in such an emotional and foul mood for most of the following day. It doesn't for me. I wake up always very relieved that I'm not drinking, and happy that I've got nearly 8 years of sobriety under my belt, and grateful that I'm so much happier and more positive and just better all round for not drinking. So maybe you should do the same. Don't try, you can't stop what you dream about. Don't worry about it. Just you're not drinking, and that's the important things. Here's another sort of oddly worded. This is questions about alcoholic cerebral ataxia and neuropathy. So there's no question, it just says questions about it. I don't know much about it. I think it's where you cause yourself long-term permanent nerve damage by drinking, which really I think just underlines the fact that the effect that alcohol has on your nerves, because it sedates, and then when it wears off, your nerves are like hypersensitive. And of course, if you're doing that to extremes over and over again, surprise, surprise, you cause them damage. Could you talk about the brain's capacity for pleasure, enjoyable experience when drinking? Then what happens when we stop drinking? I seem to remember from your books that we were able to have more joy once we stopped drinking. I've been thinking about this lately because it seems to be my experience. It seems to be my experience. Yeah, well, I think that is your experience, because whether you consider yourself to be a positive person, a happy person, whatever, you will be at your best when your brain chemistry is in its natural place. Okay, and you get your brain chemistry in its natural place by not drinking. You'll also improve dramatically if you're sleeping better. And again, you do that by not drinking. And also, if you go about it the right way, don't forget, a lot of the pleasure in drinking isn't alcohol really improves things. It's actually, without alcohol, I don't enjoy them. That same dynamic I've been talking about, going to the Mexican restaurant and sitting there miserable because you can't have a drink, and then you have a drink and suddenly you really enjoy it. So in your mind, it's all to do with the alcohol, but actually the alcohol's done nothing but remove a distressing mental conundrum that it created in the first place. So that's it. Life is supposed to be pleasurable, and all alcohol does is kind of stop you being able to enjoy that, to experience that pleasure without it. How to get past day one? That's obviously where to start. You can get all the science, all the mechanics, all the mindset in place, but you still need to get those first crucial days under your belt. And one of the big problems here is, when you stop drinking and you go through the withdrawal, you immediately feel timid, you feel afraid, everything looks big and unpleasant. Now, the natural tendency is to think, I've stopped drinking, I don't feel good, therefore I'm going to feel like this for the whole rest of my life. And that's what puts a lot of people off even wanting to try and stop. But you can talk them around and explain to them how, no, that is short-lived, it doesn't last forever. You start to feel better and better. Sorry, I'm getting cold here. Let's put that on. You start to feel better and better as time goes by. But the problem is, when you first hit that withdrawal, you start to feel timid. And when you feel ill or timid and anxious, there's a natural tendency to put off difficult things. And that's just nature's way. You know, if you're feeling ill, you naturally want to hide away and kind of not do anything difficult. So it's almost like as soon as you quit drinking, you go through this phase where you feel timid and incapable, and you just want to back away from anything that's difficult. Anything that's difficult, you want to put off. And what's the most difficult thing you're doing, perceivably, is stopping drinking, which is why it becomes very, very easy, not just with drinking, but with smoking, all these drugs, to put it off, because it never feels like the right time. It always feels like, I've picked a bad time to do it. I will do it, but just not today. And if you give in to that tendency, the days turn into weeks, months, and years and decades, and pretty soon you'll be dead and you'll have lived a fairly miserable, lethargic half-life. So sometimes you just have to knuckle down. You just have to grit your teeth and get through it. What I sometimes say to people is just give yourself, I'm not a big fan of take one day at a time, but sometimes you need to take that mentality. Just say to yourself, I'm just going to get 2-3 days sobriety under my belt, just that. Okay, not that you'll drink again at the end of that, but just that you'll reassess. You just take that bite-sized chunk to begin with, because I absolutely guarantee it. I said this last week. It's like moving a giant boulder. It's really hard to get going, but when it starts to move, it starts to pick up momentum, and that's what you need to do. You just need to get those first few days under your belt. Hi, William. I'm only on day 18, but I would really like to know the factual health benefits, please, to enforce my resolve to kick the booze forever. As has been said before, I love listening to your session. Thank you. So I've dealt with sleep and I've dealt with the brain chemistry. The other thing that has a massive impact on your day-to-day life is heart rate. So because your brain releases stimulants to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol, your heart rate goes up when you drink. So if anyone drinks and they've got a fitness tracker that takes your heart rate, look at it, your heart rate goes through the roof when you're drinking. Okay, when your heart rate goes up, your body tells you to stop and sit down. It's like a fail-safe mechanism to stop you just running and running and running till your heart pops. You know, you exercise, your heart goes up, and your body starts telling you to sit down and rest. And the faster your heart goes, the more you want to sit down. So it has an immediate impact on your energy levels. So when your heart rate goes up, you start to feel like you want to just sit down and do nothing. Now, fitness is quite an interesting thing, because a lot of fitness is actually in blood composition. Okay, so when you use your muscles, they need oxygen, and the oxygen is carried to them by the red blood cells in your blood. So when you exercise regularly, your heart's having to increase its beating regularly to get that extra oxygen via the red blood cells to the muscles. And when you do that regularly, your body adapts. Blood actually changes. It changes in two ways. Firstly, the red blood cells are taken out of circulation much earlier. And the reason that's significant is because younger blood cells can carry more oxygen. And secondly, it creates more red blood cells, so there's a greater concentration of them in the blood. So every time your heart pumps, more blood cells with more oxygen get to the muscles. So when you stop exercising, your heart rate goes lower and lower, okay, because it's pumping once and all these oxygen is getting to your muscles, which is why a massive indicator of heart rate or health, fitness, is resting heart rate. The lower your heart rate is when you're resting, the healthier you are deemed to be. Everyone has a maximum heart rate. I think it's 240 minus your age or something, but whatever it is, say it's 200. If you're starting at 40, you've got 160 to go before you're exhausted. Okay, if you're starting at 120, you've only got 80 to go until you're exhausted. So that's how much of a difference it has on your energy levels. The problem is, the reverse is also true. So if you're constantly increasing your heart rate without exercise, you become unfit. Because think about it, if your muscles don't need extra oxygen, but your heart's speeded up because your brain's just dumped a whole load of cortisol and adrenaline in your system to counter the sedating effects of the alcohol, there's too much oxygen going around. The blood cells are hitting your muscles and they're carrying oxygen that are unwanted. So the reverse happens. The blood cells are left in circulation longer and they become less and less concentrated. So in consequence, your resting heart rate goes up, which is interestingly why the biggest killer with alcohol is cardiovascular. You know, people often think about the killer with alcohol being liver disease. It's not, it's cardiovascular because of this effect it has on your heart, which is why those memes that, you know, alcohol increases your heart rate, like it's good for you. It's literally you going for an anti-run. It's you becoming unfit every time you increase your heart rate. I've completely forgotten what I was talking about now. Oh, health benefits. Yeah. So that's it. And these are immediate health benefits. These are things that will kick in within a few days. The better sleep, the lower heart rate, all of these things kick in almost immediately, and you start to feel better than you ever did when you were drinking. A year and a half out, and I still believe that I could moderate the M word. And then something happened, and now I just don't want to anymore. It's all about our belief system, and mine changed 2 nights ago, walking through Publix, and just like that, I was different. Sometimes it happens that way, like a flip of a coin. William, can you talk about the importance of changing our belief system in order to succeed? I can know all day long and my behaviour doesn't change, not until I believe I'm better off without it. Truly and deep down will I change. So firstly, well done. Secondly, I suspect you were doing what I implore people to do, which is to really concentrate on your drinking, because if you're going through moderation or you're going back to drinking or whatever it is, if you're really concentrating on it, you can start to see through the facade by thinking, actually, what is this doing for me? Is it making me feel really good? You can really change that. And this is, again, let's talk about the belief system, because we've talked about cravings. We've talked about being sat there in your Mexican restaurant on your mum's birthday, and you've got a choice of 2 mindsets. One, I want to drink and I can't enjoy myself without a drink and I'm miserable. Or, I don't have to drink this foul muck anymore. I'm free. I've seen through the illusion and I don't need it anymore. I just feel so much better. And of course, if that's your mindset, then you're going to be enjoying the food, you're going to be enjoying the company, you're not going to be drooling over other people's drinks. You're actually going to enjoy yourself. And that's why mindset is so important. It has a very practical difference in how much we are and how severe cravings are likely to be. My question is, can we really regenerate the brain after putting it through years of abuse? Do the neurons we lose go forever? And what can we do to regenerate? How long for a sobriety to make an impact on recovery? What are some... Oh no, that's another question. Okay, honestly, I don't really know. I did hear once that when you lose brain cells, they can never be replaced. But I think it's also the case that you lose a terrifying number of brain cells as soon as you reach a certain age anyway. You've got billions and billions and billions of them. I wouldn't get too bogged down on it. Alcohol does destroy brain cells, and the dehydration destroys them massively as well. And as soon as you stop, you're not making things worse. I think that's all you really need to focus on. Don't forget as well, a lot of this, I've already spoken about this, but this brain fog, this, you know, not being able to concentrate, you're forgetting things, a lot of it's tiredness as well. You know, you're taking a sedative and you're never sleeping properly. Of course, your brain's not going to be working. Give it some time, and you will start to feel much, much better than you ever did. What are some differences between recovering daily versus binge drinkers? Is it the same regarding triggers and things to do in order to avoid relapse? Yes and no. Binge drinkers tend to struggle less with, you know what I was talking about before, those first few crucial days, because a binge drinker does it all the time. They go through with a withdrawal constantly. They have a massive, this is what I used to do, drink loads and then sat there shivering and shaking and unable to sleep for a few days until you got over it. This ridiculous thing to do. I look back on it now and wonder. So it is very different, because the binge drinkers are probably much more likely to get those first days of sobriety under their belt. But they are the ones that will suffer more because it's the weekend, I'm out at the Mexican restaurant and I can't enjoy myself. it's that kind of obsession with it. So in some ways it's the same, in some ways it's quite different. I'm on my 18th year sober. Well done. I have had to say goodbye to my dad yesterday, who is on end of life with COVID. He contacted this in aged care here in Australia. I'm so grateful for sobriety. I have a fractured relationship with my family who all still drink, but use the fact that I went to AA against me. I can never have an issue with the word alcoholic, but it is interesting that people still think that they can use it as a weapon. Emotional sobriety is so important. That's, yeah, I mean, that's very true. It's not really a question there. But no, absolutely. It's interesting that they use AA, that you went to AA against you. I don't understand how, you know, reaching out to people in order to solve a problem should be held against you in any way, shape or form. But I suppose that's families for you. Hi, William. Thanks for being best at what you do and for trying to educate and help us. You are the coolest and your books rule. I'm still wrestling with my drinking habit, though doing far better than I ever thought I could if you had asked me if I could control it at all a year and a half ago. I was a daily drinker of what grew to be copious amounts of vodka in the form of dirty martinis, kind of like Sober Dave, before I decided I needed to change my relationship with alcohol before it killed me. I did 87 days sober in a row, starting August 5th, 2020, and went on to successfully moderate, drinking not to get drunk 2, maybe 3 times a month. It worked until I went on vacation at the end of August 2021, as it often does. I had 300 sober days out of 365, and then I just kind of went off the rails. And when I went away, drinking every day I was away, not to get drunk, but still, a couple of times by accident, and alone is a couple of times too many. The pattern returned because I let my guard down. My old friend was back, keeping me company. When I got back to New York City, it became spurts of sobriety, followed by spurts of drinking. Now I'm on day 27 of dry January, and I've hit this wall again. I brought alcohol home with me. Peanut butter whiskey. Ooh, sounds foul. My question is about anhedonia, which is, I think, not feeling any pleasure. I wondered if you had learned any more about it since I asked last year, because it's the most frustrating thing. Everyone else is posting about the joy and clarity and energy and all that, but for me, it's the exact opposite. It's like I know the longer I go, the more I lose my lust for life. It's like I stop drinking and just lose interest in everything. I mean, I can sing, write, make art, do stand-up, etc., but I just stop wanting to do anything at all. Why is this? Do you know? I'm sorry, this is probably not the kind of negative question you want asked in this positive group, and I absolutely do not want to discourage anyone from quitting in any way. I'm just sad and frustrated that I can't seem to get the results others are so happy about. It makes me feel like there's something wrong with me. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. I really am trying. Thanks you, and sorry for the post. So have a think about what I spoke about before and about the craving thing. Because if you're kind of working at something and it's difficult, you can get to the point where it just everything feels like it's hard work. And of course, if you're kind of forcing it, you're probably not feeling it. And I always slightly worry about the whole moderation thing, because let me put it this way: to want to moderate, you've got to believe that alcohol has a benefit. And if you've got that belief that alcohol has a benefit, whether you're on holiday or out with friends or whatever, when that niggling kind of feeling is there, you're not going to be enjoying it particularly, because it goes back, and I call it craving. You might not be sat there like tearing your hair out wanting a drink, but you might be sat with friends, chatting to them, but kind of feeling like something's missing. So you're not properly engaging in it. You're not really getting there. And it sounds like it's a mindset thing because of that, because you still see it as a benefit. You still see it as something, but start really analysing. It is a sedative. It doesn't do anything other than sedate you. Try and fall in love with sobriety. This is not a line of mine. I forget who said it now. I think Sharon Hartley said it originally. She was on the live a while ago, but you've got to fall in love with sobriety. You need to like really embrace it, really go for it. Alcohol only ever holds you back, and whoever you are, whatever you believe about alcohol, it's not going to be doing you any favors. So try and start looking at that mindset try and start thinking, well, why would I want to moderate? What would alcohol give me? Having 1 or 2 drinks here or there, okay, it's going to leave me slightly dulled. It will spoil my night's sleep, but probably less so than if I had a load to drink, and it will leave a corresponding feeling of anxiety. Again, albeit less if I was drinking more, but it's all negative. So maybe start trying to work on that mindset bit. Because it sounds like you're getting there, but it feels to me like you're having to force it all the time, and it's always kind of like teetering on the edge, which I would emphasize is probably better than drinking anyway, but maybe start trying to work through that. Hey there. What drove you to write your books? Wow, I'm just at the hour stage as well. I kind of felt, I thought they would help people. And I felt obliged to do it, and I put it off for ages and ages. I found it incredibly difficult, and I started it and gave up as too big a job, and then I kind of felt guilty, and I went through it all again and did it. So really it was that, but actually I'm very glad I did, because both of them helped to clarify things. For me, writing helps to solidify things in my own mind. I'm sure I've said this before, but someone once said, if you want to know a subject, teach it. Because in trying to explain it to someone and having questions about it, and people, you really start to get to know it at a deeper level yourself. I would say teach it or write about it, because when you start to set it down, when you start to articulate it, firstly, you start to spot holes in it, but secondly, you help clarify things in your own mind. So it was massively useful for me. And the last question, who do you believe would especially benefit from doing the new online course you have prepared? I think pretty much anyone. It covers what's in the books, but actually, like I've said, there's a couple of things in there, like that whole thing about, coming up to a stressful event and how to deal with it, that aren't in the books. And also, I mean, so Alcohol Explained was published like 7 years ago now. Alcohol Explained 2 was published, I forget when, but a few years ago. So the course is almost like an interactive book. It covers what's in the books, but just maybe articulated better, because I've had however many years of explaining it again and again and again in lives and podcasts and interview and radio and all the rest of it. So hopefully it's kind of a vastly improved version of them. And it does, as I say, it does cover stuff that isn't in either of the books. So hopefully it's kind of all encompassing. If you do want to do the course, don't yet, because Sunday, hopefully as of Sunday, there'll be a similar thing on the website that was for Alcohol Explained. So for Alcohol Explained, the first 5 chapters of the book are on the website. It's a PDF. You just click on it and you can go and read it. You don't need to sign up or anything. We're doing the same thing for the first 7 chapters of the course. So if you're interested in the course, don't do it. Try it on Sunday. As I say, the first 7 chapters are there, and you'll kind of get a feel for what it is, and then you can give it a go. So as I say, that should be there on Sunday. I will do a post in the group with a link directly to the page on the internet site, on the site where the course is. And as I say, you should literally just be able to click on it, and you go straight into the course, and you can do those first 7 modules, which I think is much the same as the first bit. That's like the physiological side of things, with a sort of set of questions at the end of it. So hopefully that'll give you a good idea of what the course is about. The rest of the course continues, 70 odd modules, but it should be fairly comprehensive, and it should really be dealing with pretty much every belief you have about alcohol, and hopefully turning it on its head and giving you something a bit more realistic to anchor onto, particularly if you're struggling. Wow, that was a long one. Thanks for listening, everyone. I hope I haven't bored you senseless, but I suppose if I have done, you'll be long gone. So anyway, thanks. Have a good weekend, and see you soon. Bye.